All right, welcome. I am Chris Murray, the Director of Graduate Admissions at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and I have a fine panel of women here today to talk about women in STEM, in the STEM fields, and specifically about graduate study. Let me kind of give you the lay of the land a little bit and tell you kind of who's on today. We've got a couple of people who've logged in so far from RPI, thank you. And then Renee, who maybe is, doesn't have school associated, but maybe somebody who's currently in industry. And you are both interested in graduate study in the next year or so, which is fantastic. My goals for today, it's kind of an impossible task, but I want to give you a sense of the breadth of opportunities that are available in graduate study, and also a sense of how to begin to prepare yourself for graduate study by the help of the folks who are here as panelists. I'm going to try to do a little bit of talking and have them do a lot of talking. What we're going to do in just a moment is get started with introductions, and then we're going to do some prepared questions and answers for about half the time. And then I'm going to turn it over to folks who are there. So the way that you're going to ask us questions, you have a chat box. You've been typing in, which is great. So you're going to type into that chat box, and when we get to the second part, we'll read your questions from there, and we'll pose them to the group. All right, so I want to start out by introducing folks in our biology department. So we have Kinsley French and Dr. Susan Gilbert, who wants to go by Susan. So please feel free to introduce yourselves.
So as she said, I'm Kinsley. I'm a graduate student in the biology department, and I actually recently just defended my thesis, so it's doctor now. Really exciting. And so prior to my graduate study, I actually did undergraduate study here at RPI as a dual major in math and biology. So I've actually been at RPI for 7 years. My current research focuses on understanding amyloid fibrils found in semen. They're found to increase HIV infectivity, so we're trying to understand how they work, and I think that's about all I have to say for now.
Terrific.
So as Chris said, I'm Susan Gilbert. I'm a professor, and I'm also head of the Department of Biological Sciences. I came to RPI in 2007. My research is on molecular motors that move things around in cells, and they can also change the basic skeleton of cells to bring forth different types of functions. What Kinsley didn't tell you is that she was a part of the accelerated VS PhD program here at RPI, and so it's a combination where you spend about 3 years in your undergraduate work and then move directly into your PhD work. And I think what you'll hear around the table are a number of different opportunities and programs within each of the schools as well as within each of the departments.
Terrific, thank you. All right, the next department that I want to introduce is Mechanical, Aerospace, and Nuclear Engineering, and we have Emily Liu and Lauren Bolden. So,
Hi, my name is Emily Liu, Associate Professor in Mechanical, Aerospace, and Nuclear Engineering. I've been working at Rensselaer since 2006. Before that, I was in Massachusetts Institute of Technology for 6 years as well, for some years for graduate students and 10 months for postdoc. My research focus is mainly nanoscale to mesoscale scattering experiments, simulations, as well as theories. We try to understand and predict the materials at that scales, and hopefully to bring the scale up to microscopic level.
terrific.
Hi, I'm Lauren Bolden. I'm a second-year PhD student. I'm studying under Dr. Liu. I have a fellowship through the Department of Energy, and my research is in small angle X-ray scattering of nanoparticles.
Terrific, thank you. Next, I want to turn to Chemical and Biological Engineering. So we have Dr. Cynthia Collins and Samantha McBride. Cynthia.
So I'm Cynthia Collins. I'm an assistant professor in Chemical and Biological Engineering here. I have been here since 2008. Prior to that, I did a PhD at Caltech and a postdoc in Canada at the University of Calgary. The research in my group is Focused a lot in the realm of synthetic biology, so within the biological realm of the chemical engineering field. And my group does a lot of protein engineering and development of new transcriptional and gene regulation systems. We combine both experimental methods and mathematical modeling.
Terrific.
My name is Samantha McBride. I'm a first-year PhD student here in the Department of Chemical Engineering. I did my undergrad at the University of Nevada, Reno, actually in environmental engineering, and I came here to study fluid mechanics and interfacial phenomena. Right now, I actually work with an advisor in the mechanical department, and I study amyloid fiber formation under shear flows.
Excellent. Thank you. And finally, we have Dr. Victoria Bennett, who's actually doing double duty for civil and environmental engineering. She is both a faculty member here as well as an alum.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Victoria Bennett from Civil and Environmental Engineering. I completed my undergraduate, master's, and PhD here at Rensselaer, and then did a postdoc, and they foolishly hired me in the department as well. So now I'm in my first year as an assistant professor. And so it's a different side of it, certainly going from being the student to being the advisor, and I think that offers a unique perspective, so I'm happy to answer from both sides of the table.
Terrific. All right, we'll go ahead and get started with some of the questions that we've prepared, and I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth between the students and the faculty members. If there's anything that, any of one of the panelists says that's interesting to you, feel free to jot that down, put it in the chat box, and we can follow up or give more information as we go through today's webinar. So I'm going to start out with Kinsley. Question for you. What types of mentors helped prepare you for graduate school?
So there were multiple mentors that really helped me prepare for graduate school. The main one I'd have to say was my undergraduate research advisor. By working on research projects in his laboratory, it really gave me an idea of what kinds of tasks and research and experimental thinking was necessary to be successful in graduate school. Of course, there were many other professors that I met throughout my career, and they were all extremely supportive of my goals and were always willing to give solid advice.
Perfect. I'm going to turn the same question over to you, Victoria. Talk to us about mentors, because we often on the grad side, as we're going out and talking to students in undergraduate schools at fairs and research conferences, talk a lot about mentors.
I actually didn't participate directly in undergraduate research here at RPI, but I was fortunate enough to have a senior faculty member take interest in my progress through the degree and notice that I was ahead enough to say that maybe she would be interested in graduate school, and so that he was actually the one that pushed me all along to stay and convinced me that a PhD was a good idea and that it was worth the time and energy to put into it. But I would say also I found mentorship, or at least getting started in the PhD process, from the administrative assistants in the department that I was applying to, because they were certainly more in tune to the faculty in that department that would have projects that maybe would be of interest to me, and also the funding available. So I would say you can look outside of the typical spots for mentors.
Excellent, excellent. And this is one of the things that we talk a lot about when we're recruiting students is, if you want a safe space to start, the administrative staff or the staff at an institution are a great place, and often they have a lot more knowledge than you'd expect. So thank you. I think that's terrific. I'm going to take questions as we think. Let's see. Did your mentor reach out to you, or the other way around? Actually, yeah. Let's take that now if you'll both address.
Well, in my case, my mentor reached out to me. It was I wasn't necessarily considering graduate school, and so I got an email out of the blue saying your credits are such that you would be able to get a bachelor's and a master's degree in 4 years, which is now something we actually push through our co-terminal program. But at that time, he reached out to me to gauge my interest.
In my case, I'd say there's a little bit of both. So as Susan said, I was part of the accelerated BS PhD program. So after my freshman year, actually, they contacted me saying, hey, you look like you're a good candidate for this. Or have you considered graduate school? And I thought about it. I'm like, well, you know, I haven't, but this might be really exciting. I took a research class, it seemed really fun. So then I applied for the program, I got in, and then I actually reached out to my current mentor for an undergraduate research project. And then after I reached out to him, he was extremely supportive of my research goals. So it kind of went two ways in my case.
Perfect. Actually, anybody else, since we have such a small group, we'll kind of do it maybe a little bit frequent. Anybody else want to comment on mentors if you have something?
I think it's actually really important for young students, you know, sophomores, juniors, to actually figure out who they want to be their mentors and actually start engaging and be proactive in starting those relationships. So whether or not it comes from a class you really love, or you end up going to office hours and have a great conversation, or it's your advisor, actually being proactive in building those relationships. It's great when they come, you know, someone comes and tells you you're doing wonderful, go to graduate school, but don't wait for that to happen. Start building those relationships. Especially if you come in a large class, you know, you're going to want letter writers, whether or not it's for jobs or for graduate school. And so building those relationships, whether or not they turn into mentoring relationships. So I encourage people to be proactive about those kinds of things.
I guess the other thing that I would add is that mentors come in all shapes and sizes. So I would have to say that some of my best mentors had been men. Some of my best mentors had been students. And so be very open about not necessarily always looking ahead of where you are professionally for mentors. I think we all need mentors at all different stages and in different types of mentors.
Terrific. Terrific. Yeah, thank you. That's a very well-rounded answer. Anything else on mentors?
I want to also comment about Cynthia saying to be very proactive. That is very, very important. Plenty of times I got students coming with different issues, but I would say, don't you consider a graduate program? And she usually would say, I don't think I can do it. I said, why not? You did so far so great already. I mean, you just, I looked at all her, past experiences and all the performance. I said, you will make a perfect graduate student. So, sometimes maybe you haven't thought that you have the capabilities, but you really need to talk to others and then get the experiences going from mentors, you know. So, it's open dialogue. It's not just say, oh, I really want to just ask a mentor for a graduate study. It's more like, can I do it? Can I get some discussions going? You know, all those things. So,
great. Great. All right, let's hit another student question in perspective. This one I'm going to start with Samantha. You know, we all have ideas about what a big event in our life is going to be like. Marriage, the birth of a baby, graduate school. Talk to us a little about, you know, did graduate school, was it what you thought it would be? Why why not?
You know, for the most part, I think graduate school is what I expected. I expected to have harder classes, more independence as a researcher, and working closer with the professors, as well as mentoring undergrads. One of the things I didn't really expect was the change of the grading scales in the classes. So you have to put a lot more effort in because you're with people who are as determined and as intelligent as you now. So you have to put a lot more effort into your classes. At the same time, no one really fails the class because in grad school, they invest a lot of time and money into you, and they don't want to kick anybody out. You're not going to fail out of grad school unless you try to fail. So that's kind of nice because it pushes you to do your best, but at the same time, you know that you're okay.
Great. I'm going to pose the same question back to you, Kinsley.
So in general, it really was what I expected. I mean, so one thing that's different in terms of, you know, what undergraduate is versus graduate is it's really, there's definitely more of a focus on research and then allotting your time between research, TAing, and I'm missing something, classes. Those are important too. So you really have to learn how to, it's kind of like, especially if you have a TAing and research, it's almost like juggling, you know, with your classes, like a part-time job with it. And they're all equally important because they're all giving you experience, which is going to help build your careers. But they are a bit different in terms of the content that you need to learn and the expectations for your learning from classes and research. You kind of need to be self-driven in terms of the questions you ask, and they won't necessarily you know, a lot of the classes I took were literature based, so a lot of it you have to kind of learn the material yourself a little bit more and come if you need help.
Terrific. Renee or Kari or Carrie, I apologize, I can't ask you directly how to pronounce it. Any follow-up questions to the answers that Samantha and Kinsley provided? All right, I want to move things on to the faculty a little bit and ask, let me start with you, Emily. What advice do you have for current juniors or sophomores that are on the call that may be interested in graduate study?
Okay, so my general feeling is, let me differentiate juniors and sophomores a little bit. Because for juniors, this is just a perfect timing that you really need to have the futures planned out. If you want to graduate on time and then pursue graduate school immediately, not waiting for, say, 6 months or a year, I would say this summer is the preparation time perfectly. For example, if you need to take GRE exams, that is the best time for you to take it. Because once you start your senior year, you're going to be very busy with applications and everything, graduation as well. And for sophomores, on the other hand, it's more focused on building your research experience, for example, having interns somewhere, or going about any other experiences that you want to build upon for your graduate study or any other careers you want to pursue. So for sophomores, you may or may not get perfect, say, research experience through this summer because you still haven't taken enough core courses that you need. However, it is the best time to try. I mean, so the summer is also a busy time for you that try to do some research going on.
Absolutely, about the summer. I just have a note here. Emily, would you just speak up a little bit, I think, so that we can hear you a little bit better on the receiving?
Okay, yeah. You can ask me to repeat if it's needed, but let me try to emphasize more about juniors since that's the major question about. For juniors, I think this is really a busy summer. Definitely the time you want to build your research, and definitely the time that you can do the tests, applications, etc. So you cannot miss this best summer time. And it's when the semester starts, the fall semester starts, you probably need to send applications or try to contact with the future advisors that you want to work with or the schools, all that. Great. That's my answer.
Great. I've got a couple follow-ups in my head, but I want to give Susan a chance to answer.
So I guess the most important thing is to get involved in research early. And so definitely by sophomore year, junior year is getting a little late from the standpoint that you may expect research to be one thing, and then when you do it, discover, gee, this really isn't for me. And I think most of the competitive graduate programs look for students that have either had research experience at their own universities or colleges, or who have experienced it through co-ops and internships. And so I think it's very important for you to figure out, do you like it? And it's like trying on hats. You may not like it, and that's important to know very early on. With regard to the curriculum, I think the engineering curricula tend to be more set, but in terms of sciences and statistics and some of the other types of courses that are really, really helpful, it's important to take a rigorous curriculum so that you can actually document and be prepared for graduate school as compared to protecting your GPA. GREs do count, and I also feel, like Emily just said, that summer before your junior year is really important, not only for experiences, but to really spend a lot of time looking at the different programs, graduate programs at the different universities, and research a little bit the faculty and whose research you're most interested in. And so I think if you take time, sophomore, junior year, spread it out, be very, very thoughtful, it will save you from that panic at the beginning of junior year that's so crammed in the fall anyway. Keep in mind that many of the schools have moved up their applications to December 1st, and then that means that you have to write the personal statements, you need to get in contact with people for letters of recommendation, and so the longer you have to plan your timeline for accomplishment, I think the easier that period of time will be, and it'll also help you choose the right program for you.
Terrific answer, very comprehensive. I see, Renee, that you have a question because you're in a little bit of a different situation. I'm going to get back to that in just a moment, but I want to open it up to any of the other faculty members. Any advice for juniors or sophomores? No? You're going to save it till later. Your brilliant thoughts, I know they're going to come out. All right, so I actually have a follow-up question about GREs. Any advice that you have, Emily, maybe I know you talked a bit about the GREs, but any specific advice that you have about the GREs? One of the questions, there were several questions from folks who had RSVP'd about GREs, so I want to spend a little bit of time there. And I'm wondering specifically, if folks retake the GREs, how does that look for you as an evaluator of an application? Is there a certain number of times you recommend that they take it and then, don't take it anymore, or, talk a little bit about that.
Unfortunately, at RPI, we do have a very standard line. So if I see cases that the students really cannot pass the line or they're too far away from the line, I do suggest them to retake it.
Mm-hmm.
There were a couple of cases I suggest the students to retake and then apply. One of them applied still on time. The other one actually reapplied the next semester. Both of them succeeded. And every other qualification was perfect, but just because of GRE, the only thing actually kept them out of the door. That is something we can discuss more. But
I'm curious on that. How do other faculty members here give that sort of advice? Do you look at an application and if somebody looks like a good candidate, suggest they retake? Is that common? Or not? Or are you so competitive that you don't have that opportunity? The answer as is realistic for your department.
It's pretty rare we'll look at an application from an outside school and say retake the GREs. However, if I'm mentoring a student from RPI who's applying and they're talking to you about their package, and I think that their GREs don't necessarily reflect their capabilities, then I'll suggest that they retake it. Mm-hmm. When I evaluate an application, if someone's taken it a couple of times and they did much better the second time, I'm not going to penalize them for having to take it the second time. Mm-hmm. I think with GREs, it's really important that students actually practice. And before you go, you don't just go in and assume it's like an easy standardized test, because you won't be familiar with the questions, and it'll show. And so I think that's the best thing for the GREs, is to make sure you get practice software, whatever's out there, and make sure you're prepared for that exam.
I would follow up reinforcing what Cynthia said. Rather than use your first GRE to practice just to see what your score would be, I would suggest you actually prepare and take your GRE at the end of the summer or at the very beginning of the fall, because I feel it's a mistake to just kind of practice on one. If you get a score you don't like, then you feel bad about yourself, and so it's just better prepare and to do it once. I don't think we're seeing a lot of applications where students have had to take it multiple times, but I agree with Cynthia, if students did take it again, or for a particular area, normally verbal and quantitative are not the problem, but the writing exam can be more problem. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I would encourage you to take practice tests, and then to also plan out your application process for the investment of time for you to be successful without having to do things multiple times.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. I just want to give you kind of the admissions line for a minute to fill that in. One of the things that we talk a lot about when we meet with students is the importance of knowing the department that you're applying to and how they're going to look at different parts of your application. So we had some slightly different answers in terms of how a GRE score would be reviewed. Emily said, if everything else looked good, she would probably, contact the person and suggest a retake. Cynthia, maybe, maybe not. It depends on the competitiveness of the department that you're applying to within the school. And so again, back to what Victoria said about administrative assistants, I cannot tell you enough how valuable they can be because they know the answers to these things. And they can help guide you as to their particular departments and what they're really looking for in a candidate. Graduate school is different than being an undergrad. As an undergrad, you sort of all applied in mass and there was one set of standards and, grad school is very much differentiated by the department that you're applying to, which is why we have a variety of departments represented here in a variety of perspectives. All right, I wanted to go back to Renee's question, if I could, which was about being a 2014. Yes, so Renee, you're starting already. You've likely picked your school. If the folks here could help address what should she be doing to prepare, knowing that she's going to graduate school in the fall. She's already made her choice. What should she be doing?
Well, okay, so I saw that you said you were going to the School of Engineering. My advice would be to maybe brush up on your math, because I don't know how it was in your department, but I took math up to differential equations, and then after that, didn't really use it aside from whatever we needed to solve that particular problem. So coming to grad school, it's been very math heavy, and I've been, relearning a lot of stuff that I forgot. So I would say to maybe brush up on your math, and also, like you said, you're researching lab groups, so that's important. Just think about what you want to research. Is that going to be interesting to you for the next 4 years? And maybe even email professors if that's an option.
Great. And more to do?
I was just going to say, you're doing research on the lab groups. You should pick out 2 or 3 that you find really interesting and directly contact the professors, like Samantha said. And they can tell you additional information about specific projects they're doing, even beyond what's listed on their website. And they might even be able to tell you if they have openings and in terms of funding, or if they have a new grant. So they're going to be looking for new grad students because funding is really important. If you can avoid being a TA, you can graduate faster and your workload is much easier. And if you can find a group that has research that you will enjoy, that's always a positive. So,
perfect. Want to follow up on something Samantha said about brushing up on math. How did you do that?
Well, so we, in the Department of Chemical Engineering, we have to take a math class. And so one of the books we were assigned was Advanced Engineering Mathematics. I'm not sure who it's by. Well, if you buy an Advanced Engineering Mathematics book, that'll have a lot of the stuff that you'll go over. So, vector calculus is important. Differential equations are important to be familiar with, but not so much the methods. Just, be able to solve them, but you don't have to do what you would have done in undergrad differential equations class. So maybe just review some of that, especially the vector and matrix stuff. Just look it over, try and find some examples from books, I guess. Maybe buy a book.
One of the things that I'll be doing is following up with resources that are mentioned here. So I will figure out what book that is and the title and all of the pertinent information. I know that Susan has some information that she shared with me beforehand that I'll be articles that I'll be following up with.
So I just wanted to say something. I completely agree with everything you guys have said. Another thing that you might be interested in, at least checking out, and it's not absolutely necessary, is probably at some point in the fall or when you get an advisor, they're going to want you to start looking for fellowships, for instance. And some of those you can actually apply to before you have cemented in your graduate advisor. And having a fellowship, it can be extremely useful. So it's something that you might want to at least think about and look at the deadlines. And again, sometimes you need the advisor, sometimes you don't. So just to start pondering those things, it's always a good, doesn't hurt, it's always a good thing to do.
Perfect. Anything else that folks would like to add? In terms of okay. I want to go to Cara's question. If I have an amazing, if one has an amazing GRE score, but below the 3.2 GPA, how will that affect admission, and what is the cutoff? So I think faculty.
think it's probably department specific. If the strongest candidates that we're going to admit are going to have both outstanding GPAs and GREs, and I'm sure you realize that. That being said, if someone has outstanding GREs and that their GPA isn't exceedingly strong, then probably review it eventually. But it may be something you want to do to kind of make sure that we actually review your application earlier. And so, being the squeaky wheel and following up with the admin and figuring out who that is and saying, I'm really, really excited about graduate school in your department. I don't think, just by looking at, the metrics of being the GRE and your GPA, which are, what we look at before we look at the rest of the application. We get a ton of applications, highlight, please look at this. I have this kind of undergraduate research. I have these kinds of things, maybe you have one course for semester, and so your GPA doesn't necessarily reflect, exactly what you've done. So make the case for yourself where you're, so the GPA doesn't, drag you down. That being said, a 3.2 GPA is certainly not below one where we've actually admitted students. We have admitted students. I have a student in my group, or have had students in my group who have had GPAs and seen others that have gone to graduate school and been very successful. And so it's not a deal breaker. It's just something you might need to be a little creative so that people will actually look at beyond the numbers and look at your application carefully.
So I've got a word for what you just said, the squeaky wheel, professional persistence. Professional persistence. I'm going to coin that. It's going to have my name on it.
So I'd like to add to what Cynthia said. I think it depends on what is driving the GPA. So frequently students come in, will cruise through the first year, not develop their study skills, hit the second year and have a rough second year. And that can wreck your GPA if you are applying with all of your scores just through first semester of your junior year. And so I think if you have strong GREs and your experiences plus your GPA reflect your work ethic, that's really important. I think 3.2 is probably a touch lower for our department, but we've certainly accepted students with that because they had other parts of the application that compensated.
Yeah, good question to ask is two questions. One is, what are your average credentials? And I'm saying ask this of the department. And also, what's the range? So you get a real sense. I think 3.2, once you hear the range, it's a little different. So again, this question I would say definitely ask what schools you're interested in. Emily?
Yeah, I want to add to this. First, I think the minimum for us to accept students in the GPA should be above or at least equal to 3.0. That's the definite minimum. So if it's below that, it's almost impossible. But if it's above that, there is enough range that you can make your case. Yeah, case number one is the back courses always come from some unimportant courses. Some key courses you did fantastic, that's okay. I mean, you can make your case from that few courses that really single you out. And second is your other experiences added in. If you had fantastic research experiences or any other leadership roles and all those things, they will count. So, pretty much.
Great. Anything else to add? All right. Hopefully, Kari, that answers your question or gives you some insight into how different departments look at different credentials. I want to stick with the faculty for a minute, and I'm going to turn to Victoria. Victoria, what experiences or skills do you look for in a graduate advisee that will be working with you?
Well, I'm still early in the process as a faculty member, but I have some thoughts about skills and experiences, and I think it goes back to what was said about mentors and what Cynthia said about, don't wait for them to reach out to you if you reach out to them, because the number one thing I wrote down on my list of skills was self-motivated and someone who's going to explore on their own. I think what has been the bane of my first year has been having to carry a student along more than having them be an independent thinker. So someone who would be already inclined to those things is the type of person who would be reaching out to faculty before they even arrive on campus. And I think that that is already establishing your mindset, and also then hopefully it reflects in your work ethic as far as you wanting to get the work done and being motivated to work hard on your own to complete it.
Terrific. Same question for you, Cynthia.
Sure. I think when I start evaluating applicants as to whether or not I would want them in my group, of course I look at coursework and GREs because that gives me a sense about whether or not they're a strong student. And I might look particularly at the transcript of a few classes, related to my research group. But the most important thing tends to be undergraduate research. So does a student have some sort of experience as an undergrad outside of the classroom that might prepare them? And that doesn't mean they need to have worked in exactly the same research topic or area. It just means that having some sort of extracurricular motivation and excitement about research that they've gained as an undergrad gives someone a real competitive advantage when it comes to getting into graduate school and then into my group. And so whether or not it's, during the semester, it's an RAU program, it can be an internship at a company, but something where you've learned a little bit of experience. And occasionally, there might be a class where you do independent research as a graduate student or an undergrad that would be useful. I think, as I said, it doesn't need to be related to what my research group works on. It can be unrelated, but it's that, do you get a sense of what it means to do research, what it means to pose a hypothesis, and then test something, as opposed to an undergraduate research class where you kind of know what the outcome is in general. And then, you really want to have some sort of interest in the project. And as an advisor, I want to recruit students that are interested in the research project. And so as you're evaluating what kind of groups you want to work in, make sure that that's kind of one of the things. And when I really meet with students for the first time or potential advisees, I look for those students who have done a little bit of background reading. So they know a little bit about what my group does. They know a little bit about the general topic, maybe about some of the, cutting edge or really important problems in that area. Especially that'll kind of give them a competitive advantage in terms of me wanting to be like, yes, join my group today. Let's find you a fellowship and or REI funding and things like that. But I really, I'd like to emphasize what Victoria said, and having students that come in with that work ethic and self-motivation is really essential to be a successful graduate student. There's going to be times when things are tough, your experiments aren't working, or your math isn't working, or your code isn't running properly. You just have to be persistent. And so having students that are self-motivated, and can keep working when it's tough is really important. And it is a really independent process.
So one of the questions that we get often is, okay, great, I know that I'm going to need an advisor and I'm going to need a lab. How do I approach my perspective, and when should I do that during the process? Should I do that before I apply? Should I wait until after I apply? I'm actually going to ask each one of the faculty members to answer that question from their own perspective. What I think you're going to get is that it varies by department in terms of when folks want to be contacted and how, but I think it may be helpful to get that, because we get that question all the time.
So I would say for civil engineering, civil and environmental engineering, you would want to contact the faculty member before you apply or during the application process. We typically, and it varies even within our department between different concentrations. So I'm in geotechnical engineering, but there's also structural engineers and transportation engineers within civil. And it does vary, but for us, in my experience, a student is going to come in and be paired with an advisor. At the time of admission, they need to have identified that person before they are going to be accepted into RPI, and that person has to accept them directly. So I would say the earlier the better in the process for contacting, if that's the case of the particular department that you're interested in.
Okay, so let's contrast that with you, Susan.
So for most of the biological sciences or cell, molecular, developmental biology programs, and also many of the, or most of the biophysical type structural biology programs, you may do rotations. And so in that particular case, you may do 3 rotations in just one semester, or you may have 3 9-week rotations. And that's considered part of your training, and therefore it gives you the opportunity to find the right fit. But even then, I think it's important in the application process, through reading papers and research descriptions, to identify at least 2 or 3 people in a program that you're interested in, but at the same time be not so committed to cancer research, for example, that you're not looking more broadly. So in the programs that have rotations, have an open mind and take advantage of looking at different faculty. I think that there are other things to consider. So for example, new assistant professors who are setting up their labs are probably one of the best opportunities in terms of an advisor, because you learn from the bottom up how to set up a lab. Your advisor tends to spend much more time with you, and it's a partnership. On the other hand, more senior faculty may have more stability in terms of funding. You have to think about whether or not mentally you will do best in a smaller lab or a very large lab. Do you want the one-on-one with your advisor more, or do you want maybe the large lab where there are postdocs that will work with you one-on-one? So I think that there are a number of different approaches, and all of them can be equally successful. I think an important point, though, is to find a lab where you feel you will have an identity and you will have mentors that will enable you to get to your next step, whether that is going into industry immediately out of graduate school, or if it's to go to postdocs and hopefully have an academic position, or whether or not you want a career on the interface. It's important that you have an advisor that cares about you and will mentor you and help you get where you want to be.
There's a lot of great advice in that answer. Wow. Emily, what about your perspective?
Certainly, I agree with all others about trying to contact the faculty advisors that you may potentially work with as early as possible. But there is some potential risk with that, is if you contacted someone and you got amazed by the help from that person and you eventually didn't want to work with him or her. There is something that I have seen in the past. So you got to be wise with that, and identify only one. And if there's no rotation, all these things going on, identify only one in the potential university you send an application with. And you make sure if you are going to that school, that is the person you want to work with. That is the decision you have to make beforehand. Then yes, he or she may really help you to guide through the process and then get your applications in and get accepted, everything in a much better way, especially if you feel shaky about your performance. If one of these important aspects is not as good as what you think, and you want to make your case better, yeah, you contacting me is important, but just be aware that might be having some potential risk.
Okay, great. Okay.
So I think, building on what Emily said, I think when you think about which department you want to join, find out really early how the advisors and advisees, graduate students, are matched. And so Emily's advice works is perfect if essentially you're recruited to join a particular lab. You don't want to essentially tell 3 different advisors, yeah, I'm going to join your group, and then there'd be confusion and and challenges along the way. Whereas in other departments, you may have rotations, like Susan mentioned, or in the chemical engineering department, we recruit a pool of students, and then they have a chance within their first couple of months to meet with a range of faculty and then be assigned. And so some of the tactics can be, or strategy might be a little bit different depending on what that is. And so, and learning early on what department and how the process works, I think is really important. In terms of contacting faculty, I think, at least identifying a department or a school where there's 2 or 3 different faculty that you would be happy working with, you should do before you even think about applying. Unless it's a really rare condition, going to a school where there's only one person you would think about working with is pretty risky. Although it can work out, but it's a pretty risky endeavor. And learning about those faculty and what their research groups do beforehand, it can be very useful when you start writing your research statements, because when we see research statements that could go to any school, it's not as impressive as when we see one that's targeted to RPI, where you see a student saying, I know RPI is very strong in these 3 areas, I'm also interested in them, and these are a few of the faculty I would be excited to work in. So personalizing that is a good strategy for getting admitted. And I think starting to reach out to different professors, maybe before you go and visit a school or after the application is in, can be really helpful, and start gauging interest, who's got openings, and that kind of thing. And then you can build that interaction once you figure out if you've been admitted, and moving forwards. A couple of other things to think about. Susan mentioned like the lab group size, an assistant versus a more established group. Within that, you can think about the mentoring style that different advisors have. And so different groups and different people have different mentoring styles in terms of how often they interact with students, kind of what the expected work hours are, and that can vary from group to group. And so starting to talk to potential advisors about what their expectations are for the students, I think is really, really important. Then you won't be surprised, and you kind of know, this person likes to meet with their students once every 2 months, or this would prefer to meet once every week, and maybe that's something that will work better for how you work. And so I like to work very independently as a grad student, so I liked my advisor when I could meet with her once every month, once every week if she was available. But most of the time I wanted to meet once every month and kind of update forward.
If I can, I'm gonna push off just in terms of time. Okay. I wanted a couple things that came out from those things. One is the importance of working with your mentor or advisor, or who you identify, to help you through this process. The reason I spent so much time on this question is because it's often a point of anxiety for students. They can write things, they have test scores, but this dialoguing with potential advisors can be really nerve-wracking. One of the things I got out of what Cynthia said is know thyself is pretty important. Know what you need to be successful. And then sometimes where an advisor can help you. If you're sort of feeling stymied, what kind of student am I? They have a range of students that they work with. They'll be able to help you understand maybe what some of your needs might be. And that's an important piece of the advisor you pick, as well as the research match. In terms of time, I think I'm going to go on to our final question for the students, and then we'll open it up. Thank you, Kari and Renee, for asking questions as we've been going along. So this is one of those now that you can look back. So Lauren, I'm going to ask you to start out with, what were the 3 most important criteria that you thought about when you were choosing a grad school? And then, knowing what you know now, were there things you'd add or subtract from that list?
So the 3 things I was looking at was the advisor fit. And in terms of that, I don't like being micromanaged, and I would be more like Cynthia, inclined to do work on my own, and I'm self-motivated. But I want to check in weekly or monthly with an advisor, and that can be difficult to determine just by an hour meeting with a professor before you start at the school, and you don't want to commit and then be unhappy with the way your advisor wants to manage you. So I would suggest for that, meeting or having a lunch with their current grad students, if that's at all possible, because they can tell you exactly how the professor operates.
That's good. Do that.
Yeah. They're all not. Yeah. And second, funding was a thing for me, but the year before I applied to grad school, I applied for fellowships, and I was lucky to receive one of those. But I know the workload with some other students in our lab that are taking classes and TAing and trying to do research, that it can be a struggle. Time management is very difficult when you're completely booked out. So finding an advisor that fits with you well and maybe has a research assistantship is ideal. And then I looked at the feel of the school. I really like a small community feel. I like that I know people, the professors and other students in my department, and that was important to me. I looked at some state schools and they weren't a great fit for me just because everything was spread out all over multiple different north, south, west, east, central campuses. And if you have to travel across them all, you don't really get to know other people. And yeah, looking back now, I think I would still look at pretty much the same three things. But yeah, advisor and funding, I think, are key.
Terrific. Same question for Samantha.
Right. Well, like you, my top priority was definitely the research. I wanted somewhere that had multiple different projects that I could get really excited about, because you're going to be doing this for 4 or 5 years. You want to make sure that you stay excited about it through the whole time. And also having the options is definitely important. My second priority when looking at grad schools was the people, like the community. It's important to me to have like a personal relationship with my professors. So I got offers from other schools where it would be like I was one of 20 people in the lab group, and I just didn't like that. So definitely the community was important to me. And I think my third top priority was the school's reputation. You want to make sure that once you finish up here, you have a degree from a good school, and maybe even your professors have connections to industry or to other academics where they can help you get a postdoc or a job somewhere. I think now that I've gone through the process, I might rate, it's definitely the same priorities, but I might rate the research and the community as equal instead of research above community. Because again, if you're here and you're excited about the research, but you're miserable because everyone's really competitive and you don't have time to talk to your professor, you're just not going to be happy. It's not a good situation.
So I would like to add to that by saying that I think all of us are most creative when we're happy and when we're passionate about what we're doing. And so it doesn't matter if an advisor is the most famous scientist in the world. What is important is that when you wake up every single morning, you're excited and can hardly wait to get there, and you really want to do what your day entails, and that's the way you feel for a lifetime. I have to say, I still wake up every morning anxious to get to work, and the first thing I do is walk through the lab and talk to everyone. Unlike Cynthia, and people kind of make fun of me, but I like to talk to each person as they get their data, because it's what excites me and drives me, and I don't want my students to do things incorrectly. I want them to think independently, but technically, because so much of what we do requires some very sophisticated instrumentation, I want them to be successful. I don't want them to break that 200,000 plus piece of equipment. I want them to be able to progress and be really, really excited. And I know, based on the people that are in this room, everyone wakes up really excited every day to go to lab and do what they do, even if it means at the PI level, you're going to your office part of the day to do what you need to do. So I would say find an environment where you're happy and you're passionate, because you will be the most creative in that environment.
Any rebuttal or anything you want to?
I'm not sure how that conflicts with what I
Any other thoughts on that last question? This can be from anybody because you all, think about everybody in this room, whether they're faculty or they're current students, went through the process. So, feel free, faculty, to answer the same question. 3 things that were your priorities as you were thinking about graduate school, and would that change based on your experience?
I think I would like to reiterate something that someone else said. I think when you think about research priorities, it's really great, but be broad in terms of what you're interested in. I see a lot of students come in and they're very excited about working in the exact same area they did their undergraduate research, which is really kind of an experiential choice. So I have experience in this, you kind of feel familiar with it, so keep doing that. And so I don't necessarily think that's the right choice for a lot of students. And so think really broadly about what research topics you might find really exciting. I see graduate students going out on visits to graduate schools and coming back and being like, oh my gosh, I'm so interested in all these more broad things, which is so exciting for me to see. And so if you can start thinking about that earlier in the process, you might, broaden, potential advisors even earlier.
Any other thoughts? So I want to give a chance for Renee and Kari to ask any questions that you might have. You've been great about asking questions as we go on, but let me ask you both, anything that you want to know that we didn't talk about so we can spend some time there in our last few minutes. And if you have nothing, if there's nothing that you're interested in particularly, just type that in so we know. Perfect. I love that it's like real time. I can see you typing. No pressure though to type quickly now that I said that. We're both typing, so we got to cover it. Thank you both for being on today's call. So we've got Kari. Any thoughts on graduate study during a full-time job? Okay, so you're a full-time person and you're doing part-time graduate study. I should ask which level, master's or PhD? Master's. Any thoughts on that? And this can be from anyone, students or faculty members.
I think it's going to depend on the particular master's program. We do see students that are working in industry that come and do some of the coursework ahead of time, and so in that case it's part-time, but most of the PhD programs that I know about across the country, it's a full-time commitment and you receive a stipend and tuition paid for you to be able to be a full-time student. And I think it's a full-time overcharged commitment. And so it'd be very difficult to do it and work at a full-time job.
Yeah.
I can add to that. Some universities are designed for students who have a full-time job at the same time to take master program. Those schools are more like co-op type, so they have all the classes offered at nights, for example. Oh yeah, and I mean those universities are really designed for this type of full-time job, plus in the daytime and plus having classes at nights and weekends. RPI is not particularly fit into that program very well because most of our classes are offered during daytime, so you have to sort of juggle between your job and RPI classes. But we definitely still have seen students who are doing that, but it means much longer time for you to actually get the degree.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect point, and it goes back to, know the institutions and the departments that you're applying to. Just to look at what are the top-ranked schools, that may be a place to start, but you've got to go a whole lot deeper. I'm hoping today has kind of given you a laundry list of, particularly Kari, of things to do. I want to get to the question Renee had. Do any of the students have children, and how is the balance? And if you don't, but could talk about peers that do, that would be helpful.
Yeah, we did have a couple of cases that the students either brought the children to the program or have given birth to the children during the program. Our institution is particularly good for that because actually the women graduate student got paid for a semester at least by the institution, not even with any teaching assistant or research assistant fellowship.
It's also parent leave, so
Exactly.
it includes the father also.
Exactly, it's a parent leave as well for at least a semester. So during that semester, you don't need to worry about funding is being taken away, and you can take some months with your newborn kids, all that. And it's definitely doable, but of course, before and after that semester, your life is going to be quite different because you have a child with you from that time. And then plenty of cases we see that the students' graduation were postponed a little bit from a year to a couple of years, that kind of range. But certainly doable. We got a student who graduated a couple of years ago with 2 kids, by the way. So, yeah, she did great.
Any other answers to add to that?
There's many grad students that have children. There's actually graduate student housing, entire apartment buildings, like four floors of family housing. So
That's right. So if that's an important part on your list of the top 3, if that's important, then one of the questions is what policies and what facilities do you have for my family that I'm bringing with me or plan to have? So really important question. I want to be sensitive to everyone's time, panelists and participants. So I want to give everybody, the round robin, 5-10 second, anything that you want to make sure that folks both on today but might be listening to the recording know about being a graduate student or faculty. Anybody?
Just one more question.
I'll get to that. So I want to do my round robin here. So anybody, just last minute thoughts, most important thing you want these folks to take away?
So in addition to what we've said today, there are a large number of resources that answer all of these questions. And so you can look on different professional society web pages. You can search on YouTube. There are a ton of different ways to get information. And then you can always follow up and ask any of us questions that you were uncomfortable asking through this webinar process, or even ask Chris, because she has tremendous experience with all of the departments through graduate admissions.
Perfect. And all of our panelists, and this just speaks to how willing they are to work with prospective students. Everybody said yes. Anybody on today's call can follow up with me. So I'll be giving you contact information for each of our panelists. Anybody else? Last minute thoughts? We can go around, or if you have something, shout it out.
So my last minute thought is, if you are currently stuck by how much homework and everything you need to do every day for sophomore, junior class, or your job, don't just think that you can't do the graduate school. Most of us have gone through that, and we actually made it. So it's not a problem.
Terrific. Anything else? Last minute thoughts?
I'll add one other thing. I think sometimes, based on where you are in your life, you look at graduate school or any of the professional schools as being so overwhelming, or even the careers. And I would say that it's all about time management and being very focused, that you use your time appropriately. And in some ways, moms with kids are incredibly focused, and they may accomplish more in a workday than their peer group who do not have children. So do not allow any one situation to allow you to say, well, I'm not sure I can do that. Make a commitment and do it, because I think you can.
Terrific. You pointed out that, Kari, one last question. I don't know that it's a question necessarily. Kari, is there a question as part of your last comment? So if a PhD was going to be obtained, then it would mean taking a few years off to pursue it. Good to know. Okay. So I just want to make sure I'm not missing something there. Kari, oh, you went away. Well, while you are doing that, I'm going to kind of give my wrap-up thoughts. Thank you all of you, for being here for today. I think you heard a lot of things, a lot of different perspectives. Some key themes that I heard, things vary by department. And so it's really important whether you're chemical and biological, you're civil engineering, biology, or our main department, know the specifics of your department. That's everything from know the credentials, average credentials, to knowing on a more qualitative basis, what are they looking for, right? And being able to make your case. If it's not made in paper, how else can you make your case well? Which I think was Cynthia's point. Start early. I think, you know, we heard sophomore year, not too early. Junior year, you should be. So again, I know this doesn't apply to Renee, to Kari, and to certainly folks who might be listening to this later on. Begin early, visit campus. That doesn't come out a lot, but I would say from my standpoint, go to the campus, meet face-to-face with prospective advisors, get the student perspective, sit down and have lunch with students. It's invaluable whether you do that before applying or you do it you know, once you're admitted. And thirdly, I'd say, you know, we talked a lot about mentors and advisors. When you get a good fit, we talked about research fit, that's one kind of fit, but also the fit that you have even right now with people who are your mentors or your undergraduate advisors. Be clear that you want to go to graduate school, and then continue to ask for their advice at different points during the process, whether it's reading an essay or it's, you know, I've read about this faculty member, do you know that person, you know, what do you think? Again, you know, the resources that you have are very broad, and use them well to help you be successful. As Susan said, you can be successful and use all the resources that you have at hand. I think with that, we'll wrap up. Thank you to each one of you. Thank you to our participants on today's call and webinar. And just want to make sure, okay, the thank yous are coming through. Wonderful. You're welcome. And like I said, I'll be sending out follow-up information, resources, and email and contact information. And please feel free to continue the dialogue. Thank you so much.